Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here talking all things leadership. Here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And today we're going to be talking about the third principle of the simple leadership method: mastery, or being masterful, and the art of mastery and how you can use it to elevate your leadership potential. So, the obvious question, the first question is, what is mastery, right? What does it mean to be masterful? And so mastery simply refers to the state of having a high level of expertise or skill in a particular area. And as we relate it to leadership, we're talking about as it relates to yourself, right? Being a master of yourself, of your emotions, and a master of leadership principles in general. And I would say that extends to relationships, because you can't lead well if you are not good at building relationships, because in order to have trust, right? And there's this string that carries through the theme, right? You can't have trust if you don't build relationship. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to lead well. So it starts with that, where you have to become knowledgeable, right, about and highly proficient in a number of subject matter areas and the activities that you embark on. So mastery is associated with the excellence and exceptional performance of all of those areas and others that we are going to talk about. But it's not just knowledge and skill, right? It's the ability to apply them. It doesn't make any sense to have knowledge about things if you don't then put it into practice, right? Sustained use, consistent effort, practice, and being willing to get feedback, right? So that you can learn from your mistakes and continue to grow. So, Robert, what say you?
Yikes.
We get started in this subject.
You gave a very comprehensive definition of mastery. And it's one of the things that came to mind when you were talking. It's really two things. It's having deep knowledge of that skill or topic, and also being perceived. So it's being a master and being perceived as a master, because you can actually be really excellent at something, but it doesn't matter if people don't see it that way.
Yeah.
If people don't have an opportunity to experience your brilliance or your mastery, it really doesn't matter. And so, especially when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
So I think the first, and you hit the nail right on the head when you brought up trust, because it's a weird thing, because it's a complex, and we're going to talk about complexity later, right? It's part of the reading that we're going to do. But it's a complex thing because it runs in tandem, but it's also before. So it's things that you need to start before. You need to build trust before, and then while you're exhibiting mastery or excellence, you have to continually work on trust.
Yes.
Because in order for someone to see you as a master, they have to trust you. They have to be able to say, okay, I have enough trust to, I have enough trust to let this person guide my career, let this person lead me, let this person take this project in a direction that they say it needs to go. So it really starts and continues with trust.
Trust. It takes
But
it
yet so necessary.
right. It takes the effort to build it, and then it can be broken down, dismantled so easily, right?
Yeah.
Much easier than it takes to build that trust. And so again, that comes with consistent effort and energy, and showing people who you are over a sustained period of time. It again, just showing someone that you know something, that you are a master of technical information, doesn't get you where you need to go. And so it comes with having connection. And a lot of times we hearken back, I think, to leadership, management of people from an era where it wasn't about connection.
Mm-mm.
Right? That wasn't what we were expecting from people. You did what you were told, and because you had a title, you were considered a leader, and that's sort of where that stood. And we're in a much different time now.
Well, I think we're in a much different time now, but I think that there are still a lot of leaders, and I don't want to stray too far from our topic, but there's still a lot of leaders that use that old industrial, I have the title, and therefore you need to follow me, and then they learn their leadership along the way. So if you look at some of these leaders, and I don't want to, I'm trying not to throw people under the bus, but you look at people like, Steve Jobs and those folks. I think they got better. Certainly weren't great, communicators at the end. They got better because they were learning it along the way. It took Steve Jobs getting fired from his own company to kind of like, maybe I need to think about some things. But that's, look, because the expertise was there, but lost the trust.
Yeah.
And so I think the definition that we have for simple is managed, I should say mastery is the ability to apply deep knowledge of a specific topic in a meaningful way. It's got to be meaningful to other people. And I know that what I say when I say somebody is a master is when they can explain something that's really, really a deep topic in layman's terms. When they can use a simple analogy, and I go, oh, that's what astrophysics is about. Right? Oh, that's what quantum fields are. When they can explain it like that, then they're a master.
Right.
Because they can explain it in a way that regular folks can understand.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. So the question then is, how do you do that? How do you develop this mastery? How do you get to a place where you have knowledge, expertise on a subject matter, and that subject matter could be you, right? So the different components, you, relationships, the people that you are leading, which is one of the things I think, going back to a point that you made, is that knowing what to do and then not doing it isn't particularly helpful, right? Because the people that you're dealing with, and this is that perception piece, are all different. They're individuals. And this is where I think some of the difficulty in leading well comes in, is that it's easy to treat your team as a unit, But to lead well, you need to recognize that that unit is made up of individuals,
Sure.
and you have to be able to lead each person individually as well as the group as a whole or a collective, right? And that requires effort that a lot of people haven't either stopped to think about that it takes or are not willing to do. And so the question then becomes, how do you do that? And I'm going to start where I think I always start, which is developing a clear vision,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're going to master the art of leadership, if you're going to master um, being someone who leads other people well, you have to have a clear sense of direction and purpose, and you have to develop, and I would say work with your team in developing a vision that's for yourself, for your team, and be able to communicate it clearly and communicate it often.
Right. It's having a vision, and it's also having an orientation toward mastery, and an orientation. And so I usually talk to my clients about this when they want to be really good at something, and most of my clients do, is having a mastery orientation versus a performance orientation.
Mm,
Performance orientation, you're looking at somebody else and going, I want to do better than that person, right? So it's more of a competitive thing. You're competing against something outside yourself. A mastery orientation is looking at where you are and constantly getting better. It's having that growth mindset. So you're looking at where you are right now, and you have that your vision, your, like you said, your end goal in mind, and constantly looking at what you're learning along the way to get there. You are going to fail thousands of times until you get to where you want to be. Because, like I tell my clients, success is not a straight line.
right.
People think that I'm going to start here and I'm going to be up here, and there's not going to be anything that's going to get in the way. You're going to have peaks and valleys, but the difference is the valley is going to be a lot higher than when you first started.
Yeah.
So if you look at where you are now compared to when you first started, yeah, you may be down a little bit, but you're well ahead of where you were. And to do that, you need to have three things. You have to have, planning, which is your action plan. Know what the end result is. You need to have the commitment to constantly work and practice and look at your failures, analyze that, see how you can go better, how you can do it better. You also need to evaluate. So each time you do
Mm,
it, look at, okay, this is the goal. How close did I get to the goal? Did I exceed it? Did I fall short? Did I hit it right on the mark? And then you need to get some feedback. What got in the way that prevented me from getting there? What helped me do better? And if you have a good feedback system in place, if you did something well, you can replicate it. If you did something not so well, you can look at different ways to approach it so you won't have the same
true.
outcome. So what we're really talking about is deliberate practice. And in order to engage in deliberate practice, you need to stretch yourself beyond your comfort zone, something that most of us, including myself, have a hard time with. You have to, you have to be just outside your comfort zone. So if it's something, let's say, giving a presentation without saying or whatever, you want to be able to stretch yourself and say, okay, I usually do it every sentence. I'm only going to do it, every other sentence or whatever it is. And that's probably not the best example, but I'm using that. I'm gonna die on this hill. So you're using that as your example, and you're stretching yourself. You're going outside your comfort zone,
Yeah.
so that over time you've eliminated all those ers and ums and all that stuff, and you just have clear communication when you're speaking. So constantly working just outside your comfort zone. Maybe it's delivering a presentation to a room full of people. I guess that's a better example. You're comfortable doing a room of 4 or 5 people. Maybe you do 6 or 7, and then you slowly take on opportunities where you can deliver a speech to more and more people until Before you know it, you're walking out there and you're delivering to 2,000 people, and you have all the tools in place.
Or the million that we're talking to right
Yes,
here now.
the millions that's in our mind, the millions of people.
I have a vision.
Yeah, you have a vision, right? So you have that, so that you're walking out there on stage with that, 2,000, 2,500 people, and you have the tools in place that allow you to deal with the nerves, to deal with the stress, to calm yourself down, to handle questions that you didn't anticipate, and to have that poise under pressure. So that's what we're really talking about.
And that leads into, doesn't lead into, it just covers another one of the areas, which is that continuous learning and improving, right? That great leaders are lifelong learners. And so if you're going to master being a good leader, then you need to look for those opportunities, experiences, and perspectives, and opportunities to share your knowledge, right? And continuously improve your knowledge and improve your skills.
Absolutely. And I think one of the best analogies that I can think of is martial arts. As you know, I've been involved in martial arts for a long time. And I know lots of people who are considered masters who go into other schools to learn from other styles. And when they go in, they go, I know nothing. I want you to treat me like I don't know anything. That's somebody who has a mastery orientation. Compare that to somebody else who's taken some classes, been in a couple of fights, and they go into a school and go, they're the baddest man on the planet, or baddest woman on the planet, whatever.
You mean the three stripes on my orange belt doesn't make me a master?
No, it does not. But and they walk into a school and they think that they are bad. They can take on anybody. Those people usually get tuned up by the students in the school that are really good. They usually get tuned up really quickly. But if someone's truly a master, they don't have that attitude. They go in, they go, look, they don't care if they can beat up everybody. They don't care if they can beat up the head instructor. They know that head instructor has information that's going to be beneficial to them. They remove their ego out of they don't have their performance or ego orientation in the way of them learning. And that's what we're really talking about. You have to be open. We have this expression in martial arts is, my cup is empty. You come, with your empty cup so that the person with the knowledge can fill it. That's how you need to be.
I like that example. I like that as an analogy, right? And I think it speaks to another factor, which is being willing to take calculated risks, right? And putting yourself in positions where you necessarily have to up-level your game, and going before people and saying, my cup is empty, or I don't know everything, which is one of those areas that a lot of people who are in leadership positions will fake it, pretend, right? Or just sort of leave it for people that maybe they don't say anything specifically, but they leave it for people to assume that they have all the answers, because people want to feel like somebody has the answers. And it's okay to say, I don't know, but I will find out. And that's the other part about being a leader, right? And constantly learning and growing is a willingness to say, at least to yourself, that you don't have all the answers, and taking the time and the effort to actually learn, to improve your knowledge. And so I love that sort of risk taking, going someplace and putting yourself, out there, learning from the failures that you're inevitably going to make, right? Because if you go someplace in your example where it's a different style, right, and people are doing things a little bit differently, or the approach is different, there's so much to be gained from that, rather than walking in with bravado, pretending like you have it all together.
Yeah, right. Because, and it's something that, one of the things that I love about martial arts is that there's always going to be somebody better than you. I learned that in track and field too. You could be the one today, but if you're not making sure that you're practicing and you're keeping your stuff really, really sharp, there's going to be somebody that's going to get you, and that happens, and that's okay. What did you learn from that? And I think I've learned, yeah, and this is really funny because I remember, and I may have said this on the show before, I was talking to a colleague who went back to college to get her master's degree, and she got a 90. I don't know. It was an A. It was like a 96 or something on.
You're not talking about me, are you?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I would give you the heads up if I was. I'm going to mention you today.
Because I'm still bitter about.
I remember
about the B+. So
I remember that. But it was so funny because she said, I wanted to get an A, and this is, and me, I can't help myself when it comes when somebody gives me an opportunity to do a little social science on them. I take. So I said, oh, okay. I said, what questions did you get right? And she was like, huh? I said, tell me the questions you got right. Couldn't remember any of them. I said, tell me one you got wrong. She told me when she got wrong. I said, what's the right answer? And she said, it's this. I said, you'll never forget it. And she was like, oh. I said, don't, when those things happen, take them as they're gifts.
They're gifts, yeah.
You don't know where you stay. If you do everything right and you're always getting, 100s and A's, you don't know where you really stand until you because you could be, like I said before, the baddest man on the planet in your tiny little town. And as soon as you go outside, you could be the biggest fish in that tiny little pond. You go someplace else and, you're number 110. Yeah. It's one of those things. So, that those types of situations let you know what you need to work on, how far you are from mastery, and what you need to do to have continued excellence and growth.
That's funny. It reminds me of before I met you at grad school. I went to law school, lawyer, and I remember like months after final exam. And one of the things they would tell you is when you come out of the exam, don't talk about the answers, right? And so I was very much someone that would leave the exam and just leave and go home. And I would come out of the class and people would be standing in the halls talking about, and I was like, okay, I'm not having these conversations. But I remember a couple of months later, after my first year of law school, and in the middle of the night, I woke up like out of a dead sleep with the answer to a contract question. But with that, how that relates to your story is that it let me know that when it was time to sit for the bar exam, that was going to be an area that I needed to pay some attention to. So, right, it's all feedback. Mm-hmm. That's all any of it is. So if you make a mistake, if you don't get the answer, it's just feedback and an opportunity for you to put a little more time and effort into that area so that you can master it. And so the rest of the story is that I passed the bar exam.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And here's the thing, Whitney, I'm not going to lie and say that I am perfect at doing it. No, because no one likes failing. I don't like failing. But it's being able to look at those situations and go, okay, after, so feel your feels, right? Sometimes you got to go through it and be mad, punch your pillow, scream into it, whatever, and then go back and go, okay, I've gotten that out of my system. I need to go and learn this. So you can learn from failures. And and when we say this all the time, and I've worked for organizations that didn't tolerate any kind of mistake,
Right.
and all that did was created an organization of mediocrity, because
True. Because no
people
one will take a risk. No one will do anything, right?
people were hiding mistakes.
Right. Or worse, they're hiding
They
stuff.
were hiding mistakes because
Yeah.
you have to have that balance. There are very few things that will topple your organization. There are very few mistakes that will topple your organization, right? There are mistakes every day, but you have to be able to, have tolerance for the ones that people can learn from. And certainly there are mistakes that you don't want to happen,
True.
and those, yeah, zero tolerance for those. You work in nuclear regulatory, there are certain mistakes that you cannot make. You need to
True.
have zero tolerance. But most organizations, they don't work
They don't live there.
they don't
Right.
live there, right?
Yeah.
So, but and I can always tell when someone tells me, oh, people here are excellent, or we don't make mistakes. Come on, man. It's
Which is one of those areas, and here's something else that gives you an opportunity to lead by example, right? And your willingness to lead by example, or your understanding that part of your role as a leader is to lead by example, will help you to become a master, right? Because you're constantly paying attention to whether or not people are watching you, right? What you are displaying, the behaviors that you're modeling, when it comes to making mistakes, how you handle those, right? The way you rectify, correct situations, relationships, communications, and all of that. When you keep in mind that you're leading by example, all of those things become opportunities then for you to set a standard, right? Set a standard of excellence, and people can see that. But it keeps you aware of what it is you need to be doing at all times. And so that's another way that you can master what you're doing, because you're constantly paying attention to what you're doing, not with a concern about doing it wrong or failing, but what do you do if, right? Then, and you have to go back and make to explain what you've done, why you've done it, why you made decisions that you made, right? It becomes an opportunity to explain your thinking, your strategic thinking, your vision, reiterating those things, how you're communicating. Always an opportunity for you to just dig a little deeper in that. So talk about leading by example.
absolutely, absolutely. And as a leader, you need to realize that people are always looking at you. And if you don't believe it, if you have kids, use your kids. The kids will pick out stuff. They were in the other room watching television, and they'll come back and say, I heard you say X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You're like, hi. It's the same thing. I mean, so people are always paying attention. And so if you're really talking about mastery and having a mastery mindset, and having those principles in your leadership, you're really looking at a couple of different things. Those skills and capabilities in the scope of your leadership that other people are constantly witnessing you do on a daily basis, those things you need to put a plan in place to make sure that you are constantly being good at those things, or excellent, I should say, at those things, and improving your mission, really how you communicate your mission. We're talking about, and we have this whole section in Simple about mastering your message, because that's huge when it comes to leadership. You need to master your message. And a lot of times when I work with people about, around mastering their message, I introduce the P word and they start to shiver. I go, it takes practice. You're going to have to practice. Just like anything else, I teach kids martial arts sometimes, and I say that to them too. I'm going to tell you the P word, and that's practice. We're not going to learn new things. Tony Robbins says, repetition is the mother of skill. And, I really like that, because you need to practice things. So if we're talking about your mission, if we're talking about your message, you're going to have to practice that message several times, and so that you can articulate it in a clear, credible way, because your credibility is going to come from how clearly you communicate your vision and your mission. You're muted.
You said that. It's Thursday, so it's garbage day, which happens right in the middle of our recording. So just trying to keep that out.
Yeah.
But this, the leading by example, and the point you made about communication, right? Again, how are you showing people how to relate to other people, right? You can't expect that you can talk to people any kind of way, and then in your role as someone who is developing others, right, expect that you can extricate what they see and how you're modeling behavior, and how ultimately you're going to be expecting them to grow and develop. Yeah. Right? You can't separate the two. And your example about children, right, is a good one, because I think I have shared this. I think my son was 8 years old when this lesson came like crashing down like a ton of bricks. I was pulling out of a parking lot, and preparing to pull out of a parking lot into a lane of traffic, and a car, I guess didn't want me in front of them, speeded up, right, so that I couldn't go. And my son yells, "Idiot!" And I'm like, okay, I wonder where he may have gotten that.
It's one of those things, and we see organizations do this all the time. I can just by interacting with a lower level leader, I can pretty much tell what the CEO is like, because it trickles down. And I've worked in organizations, and I worked for organizations and partnered with organizations where one of the things that would happen when someone made a mistake was they would get pulled into an office, and the leader would just rake the person over the coals. And then they would wonder why people were very timid. They didn't want to, take on extra projects. They didn't want, they didn't want to take risks. They were mediocre. And it's like, well, they're afraid, because the minute there's an error, they get just raked over the coals. Now, they didn't like it happening to them, but that was the way that they treated the people that reported to them. And so it became this cascade effect, where it just, it started just trickling down to everybody. Now, that's not always the case. There are some people that go, I don't like being treated like this. I'm going to be different, and then I'm going to leave, because that usually happens. Or they go, I'm learning a lot of what not to do.
Yeah.
And so they avoid that. But you can, usually tell, not all the time, the type of leader just by watching a lower level leader, because, but they may be an anomaly. So you have to get some other evidence. Lower level leaders, how they interact, not just one leader.
Absolutely. So as we begin to wrap this up, one, I want to ask if you've got anything that you want to make sure that we cover to prepare that. And then I want to just lay out a handful of things And we've talked about some of these already, but a handful of areas, ranges, competencies that it's important for you to master. So we've talked about some of this, but communication, being an effective communicator is highly important, right? You can't communicate your vision, the goals, expectations, etc., or persuade people or influence them if you cannot communicate well. Emotional intelligence, talked a little bit, mastering yourself, mastering your emotions, how you're expressing them, strategic thinking, team building. The one thing that we haven't talked about is delegation. It's important to be able to delegate tasks, right, and responsibilities in a way that is understandable by your team members, particularly if you could do it taking advantage of their strengths and weaknesses. Conflict resolution is another area. And then we've talked about continuous learning. Are there some things that you want to make sure that we get covered? Before you say that, just want you to know that we are doing each of these topics, each of the 6 principles of Simple, twice. So we started the year with self-awareness in January. Last month, we talked about being intentional. This month, we're talking about mastery. We'll do the other 3 the next 3 months, and then we'll start all over again in July. So if you feel like you didn't learn everything that you needed to learn about being masterful, you can certainly let us know. And when we talk about this again in the second half of the year, we'll be sure to cover that. But any other things that you want to make sure we address about being masterful in your leadership?
Well, it's the other aspect of it, and I kind of alluded to it, is adding new tools to your toolkit or toolbox, however you want to say it. Because you can be really good at a set of 5 things or 4 things, but adding to those skills will allow you to touch more people, to connect with more people, to bring more value. And that's something that it took me a while to learn, because when I came up as a trainer, I was really good at that. And I was like, this is the hill I'm going to die on. But then I realized that only took me so far.
Yeah.
Because as you know, training in organizations, a lot of leaders see that as, well, I'll give them a day off with some training. And they give people, they'll, sponsor a training course that has nothing to do with the jobs that people actually have in that organization. And people don't like that. So I wanted to bring more value. So I looked at other things. So look at other skills that you want to add to your toolkit, your toolbox, so that you can bring more value to your organization, more value to your people, and you'll be able to connect with more people.
I like that. Right. And that's one of those things where it's an opportunity. You can strengthen your strengths, right? You can continue to develop your strengths. You can also look at areas that maybe that you have some weakness in and build those up. And maybe those become areas that will allow you to touch on something new and novel that could be of absolute benefit, not only to you, but to your team and the organization.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, with that, we want to thank you for joining us. If you are interested at all in working with Mr. Hilliard, his email address is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. You want to talk a little bit about the work that you do and how someone could work with you?
Sure. I work with leaders in all levels of organizations, helping them be more effective as a leader. So I work work with you a lot on your leadership presence and dealing with complexity in organizations. And I work with leaders that want to have more effective teams, really get your team working so that they are efficient and effective. So if you want to work with me, there's my information scrolling across the screen.
Awesome. And if you are interested in working with me, you can check me out here at shiftingintoaction.now.site. Scrolling across the screen. I primarily work with clients who are looking to manage their careers. They're looking to promote, maybe making job changes, transitions, career transitions, moving into something else, and even moving out into entrepreneurship. So if that's something that is of interest to you, check it out. I also have an ebook there called Love Your Work that you can get as a gift from me to you, that would give you an opportunity to do some introspection that could help you to identify what it is you want to do, where you want to go, so that you can love the work that you do, like Robert and I do.
Fantastic.
So with that, if there's a topic that you'd like for us to cover, please reach out. Let us know. We love doing that. And if you've got any questions that you would like to ask, you can send them to us. Again, I will pop up Robert's email address. You can send an email to either of us, send a message. We would love to include the things that you're interested in on the show. So with that, reminder here, Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. So thank you for joining us again for the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And until next time, take care.
See you soon.